When people see that something they count on, something they need, is facing an existential threat, they are tempted to support anyone who says they will make sure that thing continues to exist. But what if the person making that promise brings an existential threat of their own? What if the threat they pose is even bigger? This happens all the time. It's what lots of bad actors count on in seeking power. They tap into people's fears and use them. Actually, it's what snake oil salesmen did too. There were real diseases that were killing people, and these charlatans promised to make those threats go away. But of course, they just made things worse. America is in this place right now politically, and the media is by far the biggest reason so many people are lost. This came to a head in a political story that has dominated headlines in recent days. A left wing Senate candidate won the Democratic primary in Michigan, just barely. Some people I know immediately started posting things like, "We have to set aside differences now and support this guy." Some have told me that they see MAGA as an existential threat to the United States, so they don't want to support any Republicans out of fear that that could help the MAGA movement. But many people steeped in that fear vastly underestimate the existential threat coming from the left. That is what happens when their media diet is the New York Times, CNN, and other so-called mainstream news outlets, the ones that pretend to be for everybody, but in reality hide dangers coming from the left. As some of you know, I write op-eds, columns, and they get published by a lot of different sites. Recently, after an anti-Trump website ran one of my columns about political violence, people at that site wrote messages saying they didn't think left-wing violence exists in America. Literally, they didn't know that it's a thing, let alone that multiple surveys show more support for political violence on the left than on the right. When people don't know the facts, they can't weigh existential threats. Great people with great values who want to do the right thing are being misled by the media. The race in Michigan is case in point. For this episode, I looked at the coverage and found consistently that reporting by these mainstream news giants buried or left out altogether the truth about this left-wing candidate who goes by a shortened version of his name, Abdul El-Sayed. So I dug into what he has actually said and done. Something I found shocked even me. I'll break it down for you ahead. None of that makes his Republican opponent some ideal candidate. The media has pointed out how the Republican, Mike Rogers, sold out to MAGA in a way. What the media should do is give people the whole truth so they can examine existential threats posed by any two candidates. All that's coming up. Plus, why did it take Fox to make clear that a movement Democrats are lining up behind is actively calling for the end of the United States as we know it? Talk about existential.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah.
More on that ahead. Also, I have updates for you. A massive, grim milestone in the war between Russia and Ukraine, and a new horrific attack that you almost definitely have not heard about. All that and more as I show the billion-dollar news giants that they stand corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you. My name is Josh Lebs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. You can learn about me at my website, joshlebs.com. You'll see how I spent 20 years in mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN, where I was doing all this on-air fact-checking and lots of other reporting. Throughout all that time, I saw the big problems in the mainstream media and how incredibly much false information is fed to you and how much crucial truth is not provided at all. That's what this show is all about. At the top, I often like to thank people who have been weighing in and supporting the show. As I record this, I'm still looking at so many responses to last week's episode, which included Jonah Platt and looked at Hollywood. Anyway, I'll share that with you later in the show, but I have updates for you that I want to get right into. First, a big and grim update from something you don't hear about enough, the Russia-Ukraine war. Here is a CBS report on one recent development.
Well, breaking overnight, Russia has launched a deadly barrage of strikes across Ukraine, killing at least 8 people, including 3 children. NATO member Poland was forced to scramble fighter jets to defend its airspace during the attacks.
That is awful. The death toll in the Russia-Ukraine war is exponentially beyond the war between Israel and Gaza, sparked by Gazan terrorists on October 7th, 2023. The Center for Strategic and International Studies has a new update. Here is a clip from that.
The Russian military has suffered roughly 1.4 million battlefield casualties between February 2022 and June 2026, and as many as 450,000 deaths during that same timeline. Just to put that into perspective, these rates are historically astounding. Russian fatalities in Ukraine are more than 4 times greater than all U.S. fatalities in all U.S. wars combined since World War II.
And it says Ukrainian forces have suffered somewhere around 500,000 or 600,000 total casualties, and of those, between 125,000 and 150,000 fatalities. Okay, we need to take a look at this. These figures are so huge, and you almost never hear about them, even though you did hear about the war between Israel and Gaza all the time. And the United States has poured more money into Ukraine in its war than it did to helping Israel in this war. Way more money. So the financial reasoning does not make sense. Here's what we need to look at. 2 vastly different messaging operations, propaganda operations. Gaza plays up deaths, insists that huge numbers of deaths are taking place, and refuses to say that combatants exist. And the media recites figures straight from Hamas, so you hear these figures like 70,000 total people. You don't hear any of them identified as terrorists, which great many are, and most of the reporting doesn't even mention Israeli deaths, including 1,200 people massacred in the October 7th attacks and around another 1,000 members of the military and civilians killed ever since. And of course, those numbers would be much, much huger if Israel did not have defense systems and bomb shelters. Hamas, which controls Gaza, created the largest network of tunnels ever for their terror operations. But Hamas refuses to allow any civilians underground to avoid airstrikes. Given that in Ukraine and Russia, the death toll is so much bigger, why do you not hear about it often? Well, there, neither side is working to play up numbers of deaths. They're not trying to claim victimhood. They are trying to claim strength. And neither side pretends that everybody is a civilian. This is also a powerful reminder of another fact I've mentioned on this show. Crazy protesters marching against Israel are, by definition, not anti-war. They have no problem with war existing. They are only opposed to the tiny Jewish state fighting back when attacked. The media, however, continues to pretend that they are anti-war. And while we're on this, another update, the United Nations is now acknowledging something. There is a new report about Gaza, and I'm going to read you a short quote from it right here. Acute malnutrition remains low. Yes, that is what the UN is saying, but those facts don't help the media, so they don't talk about it. Meanwhile, big media barely ever pay attention to this. I have said I'll keep an eye on it here. The constant onslaught of attacks on Christians across Africa. The best place keeping up with this is CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network. Here is a recent report.
Murder of Christians by militant Muslims. There are new reports that Fulani militants in Nigeria killed as many as 22 people in the town of Musheri in Plateau State last Saturday. And just days earlier, another attack in neighboring Kaduna State left 9 people dead. The attackers reportedly entered a home, locked the door, and began shooting everyone inside, including a pastor.
And that's just the latest in a long string of genocidal attacks by Islamist terrorists across Africa. And that phenomenon, Islamist terrorism, is growing all over the world, including right here in the United States. The only way to defeat it is to defeat it through force. That has always been the case. When terrorist groups are allowed to get away with terrorism or even rewarded for it, they do more of it, not less of it, every time. That brings us to this race in Michigan. Instead of focusing on issues in Michigan, the left-wing candidate, Abdul El-Sayed, he goes by Abdul, made it very heavily about the left's obsession, hating Israel, and therefore doing the bidding of Islamist groups that want to destabilize Israel, which is on the front lines of fighting them. Hating Israel was not a side topic in his race against Haley Stevens. It was a centerpiece. Here is PBS.
One of the biggest issues in this campaign was U.S. support for Israel. El-Sayed opposes unconditional U.S. aid to Israel, while Congresswoman Stevens has voiced support for the country.
That is how tons of news reports put it. But that right there is journalistic failure. There is no such thing as unconditional U.S. aid to any country, anywhere. It doesn't exist. Laws govern all aid. The media just echoes the left's claim that unconditional aid exists. Lots of reporting on this race talks about AIPAC, which stands for the America-Israel Public Affairs Committee, U.S. group that supported his opponent, Haley Stevens. But as I always say here, say it with me, truth equals facts plus context. Any legitimate reporting would contextualize those claims. Yes, AIPAC spent millions of dollars in this race. And Iran, Qatar, and China are spending billions of dollars on influence campaigns in the United States, pushing left-wing Islamist agendas and supporting left-wing groups that throw their weight behind candidates like El-Sayed. I've done episodes about that. I interviewed a global leader of the Uyghurs who explained why China does this. It's a huge help to China. The people who attack AIPAC regularly and falsely refer to it as foreign money. This is not an opinion or a theory. It just factually is not. It is American. They see how lies fuel the movement to weaken democracies. I have shot down the very popular lies, just literally based on pure fact. There is no genocide. It's not apartheid. These are lies fueling an anti-democratic movement. Demonizing money from AIPAC, an American group, while ignoring actual foreign money, supporting this growing hate movement on the left, that is a massive hole in our current news ecosystem. And mainstream media has failed to call out El-Sayed himself for going against what he claims to want. Here is a video clip from the Free Press.
Abdul El-Sayed, whose number one policy is to get money out of politics, is massively benefiting from money in politics. Just under $5 million, to be exact, from a collection of PACs and other independent expenditures, including a super PAC controlled by a Muslim nonprofit recently labeled as a terrorist organization in Florida and Texas, and other mega donors aligned with El-Sayed's anti-Israel politics.
These groups El-Sayed took money from are filled with people who praise terrorism and have been linked to terrorism. In the newsletter, I'll give you a bunch of links. His backers include people from CAIR, C-A-I-R, the Council on American Islamic Relations, a group I've told you about in the past. They lie constantly. It isn't just 2 U.S. states that have labeled it a terrorist organization. The United Arab Emirates has as well. The UAE is one of the Arab and Muslim nations trying to stand against the spread of Islamist violence. The Free Beacon reports that El-Sayed's father-in-law, a top donor to an El-Sayed super PAC, is among the top leaders of a Muslim Brotherhood organization linked to terror funding. This is just part of what people have not heard. El-Sayed has spent this entire campaign trying to push this idea that the United States supporting Israel's military is somehow the reason that not enough money is being spent on people in Michigan. It doesn't even make sense. Here's one example from CNN.
I believe our responsibility, though, more than anything else, is to use our tax money here in Michigan to provide healthcare in Michigan, and schools in Michigan, and roads in Michigan, rather than to send it to a foreign government that might use it in the form of bombs and tanks.
No penny spent on foreign aid to anywhere takes funding away from kids in Michigan. And unlike foreign aid in general, almost all the money spent helping Israel fight terrorists is spent in the United States. Unlike the media, I looked into this. Some of the companies getting that money are in Michigan. Okay, any news agency could look this up. It doesn't even take a whole minute. Even that is only part of the financial picture. That military cooperation includes intelligence sharing. That is a major part of the connection between the United States and the only democracy in the Middle East and North Africa. Israeli military intelligence sends warnings to the United States about attacks planned on U.S. soil, about splinter cells and groups from terrorist organizations inside the United States. Any of these could be in Michigan. And there are security forces in Michigan that have gotten training from Israeli forces in how to prevent, disrupt, and respond to terror attacks. How much money has that saved? Michigan keeps having to thwart Islamist terrorist attacks. Islamists planned a mass attack on an LGBTQ area that was thwarted. A former Michigan Army National Guard member tried to carry out a mass shooting at a U.S. military base in Warren, Michigan, on behalf of ISIS. All of this is part of the picture. See, the news should tell you all of it. Opinions about aid and which countries should get how much and which conditions should go with what, that's subjective. But it's impossible for anyone to make an ethical decision without first having the facts. If the news business was designed to ensure that people get that, then journalists would instinctively fact-check this stuff when El-Sayed or anyone else spouts off. But all this is only a drop in the bucket compared to what I'm about to share with you. El-Sayed's video after a terrorist attack in Michigan should be studied for everything it gets wrong. You wouldn't know that from the media. I didn't know that from the media until I watched it, so you don't have to. That's coming up. Plus, his deep ties to a movement that openly calls for the American democratic system of government to no longer exist.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Josh Levs.
We are blessed to be able to have a speaker this evening who speaks with a lot of heart.
An outstanding author, a principled and groundbreaking journalist, a really engaging speaker and thinker.
Broadcaster, journalist, and host of They Stand Corrected, the podcast fact-checking the news. Thank goodness.
Josh spent 20 years reporting for NPR and CNN, where he developed unique expertise on nonpartisan fact-checking. He has been called Truth Seeker in Chief.
Josh has won multiple Peabody Awards, Murrow Awards,
and awards from the AP, from the Society of Professional Journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists, and more.
His book, All In, was published by HarperCollins and won the Nautilus Gold Award for promoting positive social change. He has spoken to the United Nations, Congress, Google.
And of course, I think is very cool, won a debate at Oxford.
He launched his podcast and newsletter called They Stand Corrected to provide listeners with the truth in a world of disinformation.
Clearly, he is a much-needed voice during these crazy times.
It's my pleasure to introduce Josh Levs to you today.
Please welcome.
Please join me in welcoming Josh Levs.
I love getting out there and meeting people like you. It's such a great opportunity to answer your questions and discover more about listeners to this show and potential listeners too. If you're interested in working out something in person or online, there's a form at my website joshlevs.com. That's JOSHLEVS.com. You'll find a link in the show notes. Just click bookings. In March, a terrorist rammed his car into a synagogue in Michigan while there were lots of children inside. People who work there have said it was nearly a massacre and that the training they had received was essential in preventing it. This guy I've been telling you about, Abdul El-Sayed, who's now the Democratic Senate candidate, he put out a video at the time. I have now watched it for the first time. There is so incredibly much wrong with it. Even I was shocked. He said he stands against attacks, and it was wrong, so that's something. Then came this madness.
Hurt people hurt people. Violence is a cycle. Ayman Ghazali lost family, including 2 children, in an airstrike in Lebanon last week. They were innocent people.
They were innocent people, all of them. The terrorist's brother, who was killed in that attack in Lebanon, was a Hezbollah commander. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization under U.S. law. The guy was a terrorist, and the terrorist put his children in harm's way. Terrorists always put children in harm's way. In a previous episode, I interviewed Orly Peter, a neuropsychologist who has treated people raised in societies run by Islamist terrorist groups. She explained that these groups launch attacks and then instruct or often force kids to run into buildings when they know those buildings are going to be hit. This kind of thing happens all the time. And yes, it's tragic when civilians get killed, including children. Tons of kids were killed in Germany in World War II by the Allied forces. I've been to Nuremberg. It's tragic and the reality of war. But facts don't work for the false narrative, which has been pushed into the mainstream, where as soon as Israel fights back against terrorists, everything it does is depicted as the worst possible thing it can be. El-Sayed pretended to trace the origin for this terrorist attack in Michigan, and he, of course, said it all comes down to one source. He cautions against believing a narrative that suggests anything else.
It'll be shaped in part by the very people who launched that war that led to those airstrikes that killed those children, that drove this crazed attacker to violence against innocent people at a synagogue in Michigan.
Hear that? It wasn't radicalization that drove this attacker. Nope. It was the war. And in case that wasn't clear, he repeats it.
And they'll use it all to justify the war that created this in the first place.
The war that created this in the first place. To him, that's the start. The war, not the onslaught of terrorist attacks from Hezbollah against Americans and everyone they could kill in Israel, Jewish, not Jewish, anyone, for decades, including a group of Druze children who were just playing soccer, not the massive barrage of rockets from Hezbollah on October 7th, 2023, that was designed to keep Israel's military so busy across the north and rushing to the north that people in the south would be vulnerable to slaughter, rape, and butchering. Nope. He does not mention at any point the existence of Islamist extremism or Islamist terrorism. The radicalization leading so many Muslim people and their supporters to carry out and praise acts of violence. It's not like this one terrorist in Michigan got some new idea to go attack a synagogue. This stuff is happening constantly. But to him, to El-Sayed, that just doesn't exist. Of course, this is the same guy who had previously said that he didn't want to upset the many people in Dearborn, Michigan who support Iran and its leaders. It's the same guy who sent out a fundraising email on the October 7th anniversary, not mentioning what happened on October 7th. He used that date to pretend that the entire war is some sort of U.S. and Israeli aggression. Pretending that Islamist terrorism isn't a thing, that is a staple of this growing movement on the left. There are no Christian or Jewish terrorist groups going around the world trying to slaughter Muslims everywhere because of Islamist terrorism. No leaders in Jewish and Christian communities are trying to convince people to go kill random people. That whole way of thinking does not exist on any widespread level in any other culture right now. This is a fact that the media never stops to point out. I've shared data before, including from the Global Terrorism Index, which tracks this stuff. Islamist terrorism has skyrocketed in the West, up 280% last year. The U.S. alone saw its highest level since 2019. Islamist terrorist groups are now recruiting and indoctrinating kids as young as 8. That has been documented. And the report specifically discussed the growth of what's called Islamo-leftism, this increasing cooperation between leftist political groups and Islamist groups. I also explained that mainstream news giants, including the New York Times, the AP, and CNN, have reported on that index, the Global Terrorism Index, in years past. But they conveniently avoided it this year, even though its findings were more important to Americans than ever. That's right, not a single mention that I can find in any of those outlets, because they have been overtaken by agenda. So, great people who want to understand what's going on and want society to be better, want peace, they literally don't know what's happening. They listen to guys like this who pretend that the war is somehow the beginning of everything.
We can and must condemn the broken politics that allows leaders to make war that they pretend has no consequences. Violence never ends violence. It only perpetuates it.
Tell that to the veterans who fought in World War II and stopped the Nazis. Teach that to kids who learn about the Civil War. Say, well, the North really shouldn't have done anything about slavery or taken any action because violence only begets violence. Tell that to police who sometimes have to fight in order to stop violence. Of course, there are horrible things done in war. But this line, violence never ends violence, it only perpetuates it, no matter how someone feels, that's literally not true. How did the media not correct this? Democracies face existential threats. They only continue to exist because they have fought wars against anti-democratic forces. Those wars ensured the freedom of expression that allows him, El-Sayed, to spew all this nonsense. Those wars ensured that you can listen to me right now, that I can say things that are true. This is not complicated, but you wouldn't know any of it from him or from the news. Everyone who ignores rising Islamist terrorism is weakening democracies against it. The fewer young people know it's a thing, the fewer people will be involved in standing against it in the future. Meanwhile, El-Sayed likes to point out that he is not officially part of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. Here's what Greg Roman of the Middle East Forum, he's a former guest on this show, pointed out. I'm going to read you something he wrote here. Between 2017 and 2020, El-Sayed spoke at 6 events held by the Democratic Socialists of America, headlining a 2019 Detroit fundraiser whose organizers called him a longtime friend of Detroit DSA. Bernie Sanders endorsed him the day he launched. Every member of the squad lined up behind him. And the DSA, which held its national convention as Michigan voted, treats his rise as its own. CNN's Convention Dispatch called this the Democratic Socialists' biggest moment yet. I can also tell you, El-Sayed campaigns with DSA people constantly, including the disgusting far-left streamer Hassan Piker, who praises violence, says America deserved 9/11, and openly calls for communism. The DSA is pushing hard for El-Sayed. Americans should know what the DSA wants, but they're not finding that out from big mainstream media. That helps explain why a clip from Fox News Sunday became so significant. Fox News Sunday, by the way, airs on broadcast stations, like where people watch The Simpsons. It's not just a Fox News channel show. In here, host Shannon Bream asks DSA co-chair Megan Romer about parts of the group's platform.
Abolish the Senate.
True.
Okay. Replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them.
Yep.
Abolish ICE.
Absolutely.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah, again, that as part of a long-term program, yeah.
Okay, so no prisons. Government or public ownership of most large corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is an existential threat, as existential as it gets. She then did an interview with someone else saying that she would have taken part in celebrating Hamas the day after the October 7th massacres. This is what the Democratic Socialists are. People who watch lots of media don't know this. For example, people who watch MS Now, formerly MSNBC, in primetime surely don't know any of this. At least on MS Now's morning show, Joe Scarborough called it out.
The day after, Hamas gleefully slaughtered more Jews on October 7th than any day the Jews were slaughtered since the Holocaust. Women raped, young children shot in front of their parents, parents shot in front of young children. The DSA co-chair, which means the DSA, supports that. I really don't want to hear from the DSA anymore that they're about economic justice or health care.
A massive number of Democrats say they would consider a Democratic Socialist for president. Coming up. There are fantastic nonprofits and other organizations doing important, impactful work to make our society better. Virtually all of them get no attention from the media. News giants reflexively turn to big global NGOs that say things in keeping with the news agencies' agendas and push propaganda. But the news straight up ignores virtually all other groups. And in the attention economy, these groups need people to know about them. That's what it takes for them to survive. So it makes sense that some of these awesome organizations partner with me in a specific way. They say, we just want people to sign up for our free emails so they can see what we do. Or we just want people to add their names to a petition calling for truth or justice. That's it. No money, no time commitment, literally just these tiny steps that help show they exist. I don't say yes to every offer. I say yes to the ones you should know about. Here's how it works. In the show notes and newsletter, there are a couple of links for you. Each person who uses my link helps fund They Stand Corrected. It is a totally free, safe way that you can make this work possible. So it's a double good deed. Every time someone does that, I see that it happened. I don't see who, I just see that it happened. It shows me that you are out there, you're listening, you're responding. I feel gratitude. Please check out the links now in the show notes or newsletter. Oh, and I'm now going to start sharing them at this Facebook page that I haven't been using much, but I probably should. It's fb.com/levs. Thanks. "75% of Democrats say they would consider a Democratic Socialist for president," according to a recent poll. The DSA doesn't hide what it stands for, but the mainstream media does. So people don't see the massive existential threat. I'll tell you, something about this hit home recently. As many of you know, I have a newsletter that comes along with this show. You should absolutely get it. I got a note from Substack that it was among the top rising in its news category, which is great. I looked at what the top ones were. Number one in that category was the DSA. That threat is growing. Now, in this Michigan race, the Republican Mike Rogers has not been in the news much because he was not locked in a contested race. Mainstream news agencies have already pointed out problems with him, and we can expect a lot of coverage on those problems. They will surely play up anything wrong with him and downplay the truth about El-Sayed. this guy, Mike Rogers, was a prominent critic of Trump's election denial. But then later on, he warmed up to the election denier in chief. But he still says the legitimacy of elections should be respected. I'll explore all that in an upcoming episode. But today I have focused on what the news giants have not told you about this political figure who has been all over the news. And I can tell you this. There is no sign that the Republican in that race is fueling an anti-democratic movement. The central battle politically in this country right now is not left versus right. It's about people who stand for democracy against those who don't. It's us against the extremists. The far right and far left have merged anyway. They're on each other's podcasts. They're praising each other on social media. The horseshoe has come full circle. There's more to say on this, which is why I'll come back to it. Oh, I mentioned earlier, so many responses are coming in to last week's episode. Lots of people saying they're so glad to see people fighting the good fight in Hollywood. I'm taking a look at Instagram right now. People are writing, love this. Thank you, Jonah Platt. On the Boy George stuff I talked about, people are writing integrity, love him, all new respect and appreciation, admiration. Send me your thoughts and your questions. And if you think there's something I got wrong, tell me. I would love to do I Stand Corrected segments. There are two great ways to be in touch. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is through a form at my website. Before you go, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That helps tell the algorithms to tell more people to learn the facts on this show. I will see you next week.